Okay, so we left off on page 8. So that's where we're going to pick up. And by the way, I figured out how to type in numbers. So this will work whenever you have a document that you can't type on. If you open it as a PDF, you should be able to click this thing up here, the text box, and it typically shows up somewhere random. Oh, there it is. It's popping up right here. And then I can move it to wherever I want. So let me get the hand thing. I can move it, I can resize it, and I can type in it. Hey, girl, hey. So that's what I did up here where I ran out of room. I went and inserted a text box and put in numbers. I think some of you have figured that out whenever you're submitting your irrational and rational worksheet. So good job. Okay. So then we left off on 3. I asked you guys to do that for yourself. So check it. What did you write? So why can you not find the square root of a negative number? So like, why can we not find the square root of negative 25? Because no number multiplied by itself is negative. Number 4, what does the plus or minus sign mean when in front of the radical? It means to give both the positive and negative answer. Okay, so now we're looking at square roots of fractions. You're probably never going to see this, and if you do, I don't know, here you are. We're prepared. Okay, so the radical, which is the symbol, always acts as parentheses. Whatever is inside, or let's say under the radical, is what you have to find the square space root. Oh, I almost made it long enough. Space square root of. All right, so for example, 4/9, well, the entire fraction's under the radical, so that means we have to find the square root of 4 and of 9. So the square root of 4 is 2. And the square root of 9 is 3. So it's going to be 2/3. What's the square root of 25? It's all under the radical, so it's going to be 5/7, 5/7. 2 is not under the radical, so we're not finding the square root of 2. So we're going to leave it as 2 over, well, what's the square root of 100? 10. Ooh, hey, we can simplify even further. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 2/10 simplifies to 1/5. 5 is not under the radical, so we're leaving that as is, but the square root of 225 is 15. And that's going to be my numerator over 5. Can I simplify 15 over 5? 15 divided by 5 is 3. Yay. Okay, so equations with variables and squares or square roots. We always have to apply the inverse, which is what we talked about before. So like the inverse of squaring is square rooting. The inverse of taking the square root is squaring. Just like the inverse of multiplying is dividing, the inverse of adding is subtracting, so on and so forth. So when solving an equation, the goal is to isolate the variable, and always isolate the variable by applying the inverse. The inverse of squaring is square rooting, and the inverse of square rooting is squaring. All right, so here we have h squared equals 121. Is h by itself? No, there's that exponent. And what do we say that exponent is? If it's 2, that means that it's h squared. Well, what's the inverse of saying h squared? That means we have to take the square root of both sides. So if I'm going to take the square root of h squared, it's just h. And then I have to take the square root of 121, which is 11. Check it. Does that make sense? If I plugged in 11 in for h right here, 11 squared, is it 121? Yeah. But you know what? There's another answer. Because what happens when we take the square root? We can also have a negative. So h could technically be 11 or negative 11. Because negative 11 times negative 11 is 121. Same thing here. It's squared, so I know ultimately I'm taking the square root of the entire right side. The square root of 81, and let's go ahead and say it's plus or minus. Square root of 81 is 9. The square root of 169 is 13. So it could be positive 9 over 13 or negative 9 over 13. Okay, so here it's the square root symbol. The inverse of that to get a isolated is to square it. So I would, if I had a pen and I could write, I would put a little 2 up here and a little 2 above the 9. So what I do to one side, I have to do the other. And the square root symbol and the squared symbol cancel each other out, so it's just a equals. And then what is 9 squared? 9 times 9 is 81. Check it. Does that make sense? Is the square root of 81 9? And it is. So I could also ask the question this way. The square root of what is 4? So 4 is the small number because that's the square root. Just tell me that that's the answer. So what was the area? Remember, the area always goes under the radical. So what would have had to have been the area of that square? So b equals 16. All right, so this should always be the first, last step of the multi-step problem. Here we have, well, remember the area goes under that. So what would x equal? I'm going to square both sides to get rid of the radical and say x equals, well, 10 squared is 100. And how about we just skip the rest of this because it doesn't matter. Let's skip it. Okay, so this is the miserable part. But you know what? Because of this whole pandemic going on, I'm going to make it really easy for you. You ready? So this is square roots of non-perfect squares. For example, what's a non-perfect square? 16 is a perfect square, 4 is a perfect square, 36 is a perfect square. It means that those all could be areas of a pretty square. Well, let's say, I don't know, 2. Irrational. An irrational number, 10. Oh, and it's not letting me type. So let's say maybe 8. The square root of 50. Or 5, sure. 70 are all going to have irrational, meaning the irrational answer means that the decimal will go on forever and never repeat. So we could spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out the answer to the square root of 20 and never get there. We'll die before it happens. But let's see. So step 1, determine which two perfect squares the number falls between. For example, the square root of 22 falls in between the perfect square 16 and the perfect square 25. Step 2, find the square root of the two perfect squares. For example, the square root of 16 is 4 and the square root of 25 is 5. So that way we know, and I think y'all have done this on a worksheet, that the square root of 22 must fall in between 4 and 5. Then we would use the first square root as your whole number and guess and check. And let me explain this before I read all this because it'll make more sense. So if we're solving for the square root of 22, so for example, step 1, I'm going to find the two perfect squares that falls between. If you don't know where to start with 1 times 1. 1 times 1 is 1, not close to 22. 3 times 3, 9, still not close to 22. 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, kind of close. And then 5 times 5 is 25. Ooh, I went over. So I know that it has to fall in between 16 and 25. And then I'm going to find those answers. So I know that the square root of 16 is 4 and the square root of 25 is 5. Well, guess what? We're not done. You can't just say it's 4 point something. We got to be more precise than that. But you know what? In between 4 and 5 are a bunch of other numbers, right? But what I did here is I asked Siri. I said, hey, Siri. Oh, I thought I was going to freak out on me. I thought she was going to start listening. Okay, so I asked Siri, what is the square root of 22? And Homegirl said that it is approximately, because it's an estimate, because remember, we never actually get to the end of the number. It is approximately 4.69042. And then if you look down here, it's going to keep on going, and none of those numbers are ever going to repeat. There's no pattern. There's no method to the madness, but they just keep on going. They would go on for all eternity. But this is how we would figure it out, and it's really complicated. But I just wanted to show you this so that you know why it's irrational. So here I'm going to cheat a little bit. It says it's 4.69. So I know that on this number line here, I expanded it from 4 to 5. that it would fall in between 4.6 and 4.7. That answer would. But then I expanded it even further, and I expanded the number line from 4.6 to 4.7. So there's a bunch of other numbers in there. So I would guess and check with 4.69 because I cheated. And I would do 4.69 times 4.69. Let's see if Siri will listen. Hey Siri. 4.69 times 4.69.
21.9961.
So it's 21.9961. Still not quite 22, but 21.9961 is very close to 22. But we can keep guessing and checking, but we will never get to an answer of 22, ever. Even if I multiplied all of those numbers by itself, like that number with all the decimals by itself, I would never get an actual solid 22. I will get very close, but I'll never get 22. That's what makes it irrational. So let's say our estimated answer, and we're just going to round to one digit after the decimal. So Siri says that it's 4.69 is the square root. So I'm going to say it's 4.7. Why you not let me type? I don't know. Okay, fine. I'll do the text box. Let me go ahead and type that it's 4.7 is my estimated answer. Thank you, Siri. And I'm going to show you how to use your phones to continue to cheat to get the answer. Oh, look, it says use your calculator. And you probably don't have a calculator at home that's going to do this. So I'm going to show you how to use your phone in the next video. The square root of 35, actually, I'll show you here. So if I'm on my phone, let me unlock it. So on my phone, I'm going to go to the calculator thing, right there. And then, let me hit clear. That was where I actually did it yesterday. So there is no radical symbol here, so you have to turn your phone sideways. But before you turn your phone sideways, you got to make sure that you unlock the orientation thing so that when you turn your phone sideways, you get all those keys. And there's a radical symbol in there, and it's even got the index of 2. So clear, turn sideways. I don't know if y'all can see, but I'm going to hit that symbol first before I type in my number, and then I can type 35, hit equal sign, and it says it's 5.916. So we're going to say it's 5.9. Answer, 5.9. I've also given you a link to Desmo's graphing calculator with steps on how to solve that. And how about I just ask Siri, hey Siri, what's the square root of 70?
The square root of 70 is approximately 8.3666.
So 8.36, so we're going to say it's 8.4, because that 6 would round the 3 up to 4. Yay, answers. And that's as far as we're getting. So if you end up, basically, here's the bottom line. If you can answer what's underneath the radical, it's rational. If you can't answer it and you get some kind of crazy decimal number, it's irrational. So if your answer for this is a whole number, rational, decimal number, irrational. All right, that's all I got. Have a great week.